You've just taken your last breath. Your heart stops. But you're still there, awake, aware, and watching your own body from above. Within seconds, something or someone is coming for you. But is it light? Or is it darkness? This video is not just about death. It's about what really happens in the moments immediately after. Whether you're religious, spiritual, or just curious, nearly everyone wonders the same thing. What do I experience when I die? Do I drift into a peaceful sleep? Or am I thrust into something far more intense? Is there a tunnel of light? Do angels show up? Or do I face something much darker, depending on how I lived my life? In the next few minutes, we're going to break it all down. Not vague guesses or fluffy ideas, but real documented accounts, biblical insights, and near-death experiences that all seem to point in the same direction. And if you stick with this video until the end, what you hear might change how you live the rest of your life. The moment your heart stops beating, your body begins to shut down, but something strange happens too. People who've flatlined and come back report a sudden awareness, even as their body lies motionless. Some describe floating above their own body, watching doctors work to revive them. Others say they were pulled into complete darkness, but not the kind that feels empty. It's a darkness that feels like something or someone is there. The brain, for a few minutes after clinical death, shows bursts of activity. Scientists used to think that was just the brain shutting down, but new studies suggest it might be the brain ramping up, reaching a final state of hyper-awareness. Some even argue that this spike might be the scientific window into the soul's journey out of the body. But then come the images that nearly everyone talks about, across cultures, across religions: a tunnel, a light, a sensation of being pulled forward, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully. In the book of Luke, Jesus tells the story of a poor man named Lazarus, who dies and is carried by the angels to Abraham's side. That language isn't metaphorical. It suggests a real, visible transition, a movement from earth to something else, something sacred. At this point, what you see or don't see may depend on how you lived. For some, there's overwhelming peace. Loved ones appear. A voice, calming and familiar, welcomes them home. Others describe an unbearable weight, a feeling of being dragged downward. They try to cry out, but no one hears. For a few, it's fire, screams, or shadows watching from the edges. And whether or not you believe in hell, it's hard to ignore how many near-death accounts include it. In that first 5 minutes, the soul seems to be in a state of transition. Time doesn't move the way it does on Earth. 5 minutes could feel like an eternity, or like a flash. You're not quite in heaven, not yet judged, but you're not tied to your body anymore. This is the waiting room, the passageway. What happens next depends on where your soul is headed. There's also a powerful belief in Christian theology that the soul becomes aware of the life it lived. Not just the big events, but the moments you forgot, the times you were kind when no one noticed, or cruel when you thought no one saw. In this moment, it's said, nothing is hidden. Every thought, every motive, every word, it's laid bare. This isn't Judgment Day yet, but it's a preview, and it's deeply personal. Some describe this as beautiful, others say it's unbearable. And if you're thinking, how can all this happen in 5 minutes? Remember, We're talking about eternity.
Time as we know it doesn't apply here. What feels like 5 minutes to us might be infinite from the soul's perspective. But here's the part that rattles people the most. Once your soul leaves your body, there's no going back to change anything. You can't apologize. You can't undo the choices. You can't suddenly believe in something you spent your life ignoring. That's the hard truth. Whatever your relationship was with God, however deep or distant, it's sealed the moment you take your last breath. That's the challenge most of us don't want to face. We live like we've got unlimited time. We say things like, maybe later, or someday I'll get right with God. But death doesn't care about schedules. It shows up in a blink. A crash, a diagnosis, a single heartbeat that doesn't come. And in that moment, everything you thought you'd fix later is now permanent. Jesus told a story about a rich man and a poor beggar named Lazarus. The rich man died and found himself in torment. He begged for a second chance, not even for himself, but for his brothers. Send someone to warn them, he pleaded. But it was too late. Not even someone rising from the dead would be enough to convince those who refused to believe. The door had closed. That story wasn't just a parable. It was a warning. Once you cross over, your eternal direction is locked in. No replays, no edits. You don't get to bargain with God like he's a customer service rep. You're judged on what you believed, how you lived, and whether you truly knew him. And this isn't about being perfect. It's not about how often you went to church or how many good deeds you stacked up like poker chips. It's about whether your soul was surrendered, whether you accepted the grace that was offered freely but often ignored. It's about whether Jesus knew your name, not whether you just knew his. This is where the fear creeps in.
Because if we're honest, most of us don't live with eternity in mind. We chase comfort, status, validation. We numb our pain instead of healing it. We avoid the hard questions about life and death and God, thinking we'll deal with them later. But death has no courtesy. It doesn't call ahead, and by the time it arrives, the only thing that matters is whether you were ready. This is where things get deep, because not everyone experiences the same after-death moment. For some, it's peace, light, a warmth they can't even describe. For others, it's confusion, fear, even resistance. What causes that difference? It's not random. It's not karma. It comes down to one thing: the condition of your soul. Many people assume everyone sees the light at the end of the tunnel. But countless near-death experiences tell a more sobering story. Some people report being pulled into darkness, hearing terrifying sounds, feeling a suffocating weight on their chest. Others describe floating above their bodies, confused, watching everything unfold without the ability to speak or act. These aren't just dramatic visions. They're echoes of spiritual reality. The Bible makes it clear: after death comes judgment. But that doesn't mean a courtroom scene with God banging a gavel. It's more like a mirror. The soul is stripped bare. Every motive, every secret, every hidden thought is brought into full light. And the scariest part? Nothing can be hidden anymore. Not behind money, religion, charm, or status. What's true about you becomes fully visible in the presence of God. And this judgment doesn't take years. It doesn't drag out. It happens in an instant. A divine knowing, a soul exposed. No arguments, no defenses, just truth. And for those who never truly turned toward God, who rejected him or played the game of religion without a real relationship, it's not just a wake-up call. It's the point of no return. But here's the twist. Judgment isn't about punishment for punishment's sake. It's about justice.
It's about holiness. A soul that's rejected God its whole life doesn't suddenly desire Him in death. That soul recoils, resists, even hides, just like Adam in the garden, trying to cover himself after he sinned, except this time, there are no fig leaves left. Just you and the truth. This is the key moment, when everything makes sense. You'll suddenly understand why your life unfolded the way it did, why you felt certain nudges, certain warnings, why people were placed in your path to speak truth to you. You'll see the opportunities you ignored, the love you refused, the moments you buried your conscience just to fit in. It all comes back, crystal clear. And for those who knew God, really knew Him, this moment isn't filled with fear. It's full of awe. It's overwhelming. Yes, but it's drenched in mercy. Not because they were perfect, but because they were forgiven. They clung to grace. They humbled themselves. And now, that grace covers them like a robe. They step forward not because they earned anything, but because they were adopted. But for others, the realization is devastating. Not because they didn't know about God, but because they never chose Him. They flirted with belief, but never surrendered. They wore the label but lived their own way. And in that moment, they realize they've known the truth all along. They just didn't want it. Now here's where it gets even heavier, because in those first 5 minutes after death, something irreversible begins to take place. Your separation from the physical world is complete. The body you once lived in is now just a shell, lifeless, cold. And yet, your consciousness continues with more clarity than you've ever had before. There's no confusion anymore about whether God exists. There's no room for doubt. Reality hits like a flood. This is when the soul begins to feel the full weight of eternity, not just in the sense of forever, but in the sense of permanence. There are no do-overs, no time machines, no last-minute apologies. The clock has stopped ticking. The decisions you made on earth now echo into forever, and that forever begins now, for those who belong to God. This is when peace takes over like a blanket of warmth. Scripture says, "To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord." It's not a delay. It's not a long hallway. It's immediate presence. No more pain. No more questions. Just light, love, and the overwhelming sense of being home for the very first time. But for the soul that rejected God, this is the beginning of something terrifying. Isolation, shame, separation from the source of all life. Not because God is cruel, but because they've chosen to live life without Him, and now they must live eternity apart from Him. That's not punishment. That's simply consequence. It's like pulling a plant from the soil and wondering why it withers. Without the source, the soul begins to ache. And here's something many don't expect. The soul remembers everything. Every chance, every warning, every moment someone shared the gospel, not in a blaming way, but in a way that pierces, because now the truth is undeniable. All the distractions, the excuses, the pride, it all fades. And what remains is this, the realization that the door has closed. Some describe it like being on the outside of a banquet hall, hearing the laughter, the joy, the light, but being unable to enter. Not because God locked them out, but because they never wanted to come in while the invitation was open. And now the feast has begun without them. There's also the deep spiritual awareness that sets in. You suddenly see spiritual reality for what it always was.
The temptations you gave into weren't just bad habits, they were traps. The sins you brushed off weren't small, they were cancer. The moments you ignored God's voice, they were rescue attempts. And now it all clicks, like someone removing a veil from your eyes. And in that moment, you're not thinking about your career, or your bank account, or how many followers you had. You're thinking about relationships, about love, about whether you truly lived for something greater than yourself. The things of earth grow strangely dim, and the things of eternity come into razor focus. The soul begins to be drawn, either toward the presence of God or away from it. Not dragged, not forced, but drawn by spiritual gravity, like metal to a magnet. The soul is pulled in the direction it aligned with in life.
That alignment, forged through thousands of daily decisions, is now steering the soul's final destination, and nothing can change that now. This is the moment everything you've ever heard about eternity becomes real. Not metaphorical, not philosophical, real. You now know where you're going and why. For those who trusted in Jesus, the moment is not filled with fear, but with awe. The soul enters a realm of indescribable beauty. There are colors you've never seen, sounds that don't exist on earth, and a warmth that doesn't come from light, but from love itself. Every burden you carried drops off like a heavy coat, and you realize you were never meant to carry it to begin with. You're welcomed, not as a stranger, but as a child coming home. Some describe a procession, angels guiding the soul, a kind of divine escort into paradise. It's not floating through clouds with harps. It's more real than anything you've ever known.
Your senses are heightened. Your awareness is complete. There's no fear, no sorrow, no regret, just overwhelming joy. And in the presence of God, everything becomes clear. The questions you wrestled with on earth, they don't need to be answered anymore. Because when you're in the presence of perfect wisdom and perfect love, the need to understand fades into the background. It's not that you forget, it's that you finally see how small those questions really were compared to the greatness of God. But for the soul that rejected Him, this is the moment of separation, not the final judgment yet, but the undeniable realization that you are not where you hope to be. You're not in the light. You're not home. You're not at peace. You're aware of it all, but unable to change it. It's not hell, but it's absence. Absence of God. Absence of hope. Absence of everything you once ignored, laughed at, or pushed away. And that's what makes this moment so intense. It's not fire or brimstone. It's clarity. It's the pain of finally seeing the truth too late. The worst part isn't the environment, it's the regret. Regret is heavier than chains. You're awake now, fully, for the first time, and all you want is another chance. But none comes. This is why Jesus spoke so often about readiness. Not because He wanted to scare people, but because He wanted no one to be surprised. He knew that the first moments after death would be filled with revelation, and He didn't want anyone to meet that moment unprepared. This is the climax, the ultimate wake-up, the moment when time stops and eternity begins. And in that moment, one thing becomes painfully clear. You were never just a body. You were always a soul, and that soul was always heading somewhere. So, what does all this mean for us now, while we're still alive, breathing, watching this video, and wondering what happens next? It means this: you still have time. It means the decisions you make right now, in the middle of your ordinary life, matter more than you could ever imagine. The way you treat people, the faith you build or ignore, the love you show or withhold, none of it is wasted. Not one moment goes unnoticed in the eyes of God. Not one. And no, this isn't about being perfect. If perfection were the requirement, none of us would make it. This is about direction, about choosing the path that leads toward life, not away from it. It's about saying yes to the one who already said yes to you on the cross. The first 5 minutes after you die are irreversible, but this moment, right here, isn't. You're still shaping the eternity that waits on the other side. You're still holding the pen to your story. God doesn't want you living in fear of death. He wants you to live in light of eternity. To live like this life isn't all there is, because it isn't. To walk with Him now, so that when your soul steps into forever, it's not met with silence, but with a voice saying, "Well done." Maybe you've been ignoring that still, small voice inside. Maybe you've been numbing it with distraction, with doubt, with pride. But now, it's louder. Now, you can't pretend you didn't hear it. That's not a coincidence. That's mercy. Mercy is getting a warning before the storm. Mercy is hearing the truth before it's too late. And if you're hearing this now, it's not because God wants to condemn you. It's because He still wants to save you. So what do? You stop pretending you've got forever. You stop acting like death is some distant thing that only happens to other people. You stop living as if eternity is just a fairy tale, and you start asking the real questions. Where am I going? Who am I living for? What would happen if I stood before God right now? Those questions aren't meant to scare you.
They're meant to wake you up, because once you're awake, you can finally live on purpose. This isn't about joining a religion or memorizing rules. This is about relationship, about knowing the one who made you, who sees you, who's calling you even now. There's still time to turn around, still time to forgive, to let go, to start again. Still time to stop drifting and start walking in truth. But don't wait, because one day, you'll close your eyes for the last time, and when you open them again, what you see will depend on what you chose. If you've been living without answers, there's hope. If you've made mistakes, there's grace. If you've been running, there's a way back. Right now, you're not standing before a judge. You're being invited by a savior. The door is still open. The clock is still ticking, and eternity is still being written. Just make sure you know where your story ends.